As schools focus to college readiness and standardized tests, kids today are left in a school environment where there's no time or money for shop class. And I've seen some estimates that say 90% of high school shop classes are gone. And I've seen other estimates that make it seem much worse. Here at Taunton Press, our sister publication, Fine Home Building, has a movement called Keep Craft Alive. And they're getting together scholarships to send more kids to trade schools and programs like that. But that doesn't do a whole lot for the younger kids. That doesn't do a whole lot for kids in grade school. And I'll tell you one person who is doing everything he can for younger kids getting hands-on experience with woodworking. And sitting across from me is Michael Schloff. I got that right?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So Michael has a program called the Maplewoodshop, right?
Yes.
And how did your program get started?
So my program got started 2 years ago when I left corporate America. And I left corporate America because 2 years before that, I worked at a maker show and I ran a woodworking table. And I had a little project of making footstools for kids. And I saw how much they enjoyed it. And I also saw how much I enjoyed it. So I spent those 2 years figuring out how to make this jump. My first year, I spent teaching local classes. And then I realized a way to make it portable. And what I also realized was that by making it portable and by keeping the projects relatively simple, kids could still learn engineering skills, design skills, collaboration skills, and confidence in their hands, but they didn't necessarily need a dedicated shop teacher or a dedicated shop space. They could set up in almost any room in the school.
So you primarily you're not teaching the kids.
That's correct.
You teach the teachers.
That's exactly right.
And one thing that I was blown away by when I went to your website. What's your website, by the way?
It's maplewoodshop.com.
Okay. The pictures you see are not necessarily just kids woodworking. It's teachers. It's grown adults who probably have no experience woodworking at all. And are they math teachers? Are they science teachers?
Sure. So the teachers can be from any discipline as long as they have the right, let's call it attitude. And the attitude is that they're willing to take the leap and work with kids working with their hands. So I've trained science teachers, I've trained math teachers, I've trained special education teachers, a lot of art teachers. And so MFAs, Master of Fine Arts, often make good teachers because they're used to working with kids, working with their hands in that way. Science teachers as well. But again, anyone with that attitude of the can-do attitude, the I'm willing to try this. And to help them along, we provide lesson plans. And we also provide what I call a crawl, walk, run approach, where we start with a very simple project like string art, you know, hammering nails and connecting them with string or rubber bands, and then moving up to more complex projects, which can get fairly involved, but it's like you wouldn't want to start with the most complex project. So we start simple.
So your program is not necessarily bringing shop class back to
That's
schools.
correct.
It is getting kids who don't have access to shop class access to some woodworking experience and hands-on time with tools, right?
Right. So it turns out, I think I read a statistic that 60% of kids, and probably people for that matter, are visual learners. They don't necessarily learn by reading or by listening, but they learn by seeing and doing. And so there's a big movement towards, it's called experiential learning or project-based learning. And this is... And Maplewoodshop is a good example of experiential learning. Kids can learn by doing, they learn with their hands, and even though the projects, some are very simple-minded, it's far more than they're getting now. So what we found, it's almost like if you think of a pyramid, where the top of the pyramid might be a craft school, we're the absolute bottom layer of that pyramid.
Okay.
Pre-vocational, pre-career training to give kids a sense of, hey, I didn't realize I had this intelligence. Some kids are great readers, some kids are great speakers, some kids are great with their hands.
Yeah.
I had a preschooler just the other week where the teachers were amazed at what this preschooler could do because he doesn't speak much.
Okay.
And yet when they let him build with scrap blocks and quarter-inch dowels, and the blocks had quarter-inch holes drilled in, he made these very complex structures. And so they realized he had an intelligence they hadn't noticed before. That was very moving.
That's incredible.
Another example is a counselor that I trained was actually born with one hand. And so he had that can-do attitude, and he was adjusting coping saws, adjusting block planes with one hand.
That would be tricky.
And that's the point, is that everyone is capable. I have a huge confidence in the abilities of people and the sort of hidden talents of people. I am that kid that spent second grade in the hallway because I got kicked out for being hyper. And now I can kind of give back because there's a lot of kids like that, and a lot of us are adults. And to have a program that can help you recognize talents that you haven't discovered yet, it's a wonderful thing.
So, so you have set up. Tell us a little bit about your curriculum. Where there's you had mentioned a walk run. Whatever.
Yep, crawl, walk, run.
Crawl, walk, run. But there's also tiers to the program. So if any of our listeners are out there and they're seeing a need, I get it all the time. I'm out talking to woodworkers. It's nonstop. It's my job. And everybody tells me that there's nowhere for kids to get hands-on experience. There's nowhere. And this is something that they can actually do. You, the listener, can do something about this. What are the different levels that you have that you might be able to introduce to that, or that the listeners might be able to introduce to their school system or their kids' camp or whatever? There's a myriad of options that you have.
Sure. Right? Thank you. So the program, it always starts with safety. And we start by getting kids, and when we train the trainers, we have them focus on what I call the 5 rules of Maplewoodshop. 2 of the rules are about being mentally present. One rule is be patient. The other rule is be gentle. And the be patient is everybody gets frustrated. And if you're noticing you're getting frustrated, be aware, take a break. We sometimes, we encourage schools and camps to have a pounding block. And it can be a stump, and kids just hammer nails.
Okay.
And it's a safety valve. It's a great release. So being patient, being gentle, the tools that we use pull saws, coping saws, block planes. There's a lot of sharp tools. We don't have many accidents because the be gentle part is the tool's sharp, let it do its work. Listen to the feedback it's giving you. If it's difficult, shift your body around.
Yeah.
The other 3 rules are things that your shop teacher might have yelled at you from across the room, like your hand is not a clamp.
Yes.
Or keep both hands behind the cutting edge, or cut away from yourself. And in combination, we focus on those rules, and then we also developed cards for each tool to help remind kids how to use them. Like with a hammer, nobody ever taught me to hammer the nail gently until it stood up, then take my hand away, and then pound on it.
Yeah.
And nobody ever taught me to use my elbow instead of my wrist. But all these things, they're physics. They add up, and they create a much better experience. So we make kids competent by doing simple projects to start. A string art project or a jigsaw puzzle where it doesn't really matter the shape of the pieces.
Okay.
Or what I call Jenga blocks, with all apologies to the maker of Jenga. And it's basically taking 1x6. By the way, we standardize around 1x6 pine, number 2 pine, because it's easy to source, and we can guarantee that you'll get similar results.
Oh, so all of your projects kind of coincide with 1x6.
Yeah, we actually, so far, we're only using 10 different items, meaning most is 1x6. A footstool that we make is 1x10.
Okay.
We use 3 sizes of dowels, 1 size screw, 1 size nail, glue, and maybe a couple things I'm forgetting.
So there's not a huge list of things to keep track of for the teachers or the program managers.
I spent 2 years, when I was teaching the local classes, and then when I moved to this train the trainer model, I'm constantly looking at how can this be simpler? How can we winnow this down. So I spent a lot of time choosing the right tools, which block plane, which rasp, which saw. And so as the kids get more competent with the tools, we graduate to more complex projects. And there's nothing, for this audience, they're not doing dovetails.
Yeah.
But they are starting to do simple joinery. And how do we understand wood grain? And they learn really fast because how knots impact the work, because we're using very small nails, like 3D 1¼ inch nails. And if you hit a knot, it's going to bend.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, the nail's going to bend before you get through the wood. And no one has the real patience to drill tiny pilot holes. So kids learn a lot. In fact, what I say with every training and with every class that I teach on my own, I say, guess what? Something is going to go wrong. It's just a matter of what. And that's okay, which is really nice for this generation because it's growing up as a purely digital generation. And an expectation that comes with it is that everything's pixel perfect. And in woodworking, it isn't. And so to help kids understand that there's a lot of ways that things can be right, you know, if this, to the listener, if you think about the first project you made, and if you made in shop class, and if you still have it on your shelf, and you look at it, the stuff you're making now is technically far better, but you have an enormous amount of pride from what you made then. And those are the projects that we're helping kids create.
And that, I mean, thinking back at my own shop class experience, that pride and that confidence led me to one day saying, oh, well, my wife needs a sewing table. I can make it.
Exactly. So,
and then all of a sudden, here I am.
Exactly.
You know, but it's instilling that confidence at a young age. And I like the way that a lot of your projects coincide with different other class lessons that might be of value to teachers, where like STEM programs, you've got some LED lighting wiring going on. We've got a menorah here that is very, very simple but effective. The wiring is just, we've got binder clips and what else here?
And copper tape and LED bulbs and like watch batteries. It's very simple-minded, and we drilled 9 holes into a block of 1x6, and the copper tape's self-adhesive, and we hot glued the battery pack onto and there's screws that are holding the binder clips in place.
Yeah.
And, you know, kids struggle with these projects. This project has, I think, 27 points of failure, and I can guarantee that they all happened. and that's kind of the point. You know, something's going to go wrong, and you're going to find a way to fix it, and that's what they take away.
If you're struggling with it, go pound a nail into this block over here and come back.
And come back, and you will succeed.
Yeah.
And it's a really, those are very nice lessons. So we start simple, we can get more complex, and once kids, we have a number of lesson plans that are all thought out for teachers. They do have those intersections with other classes, a lot of geometry. We're actually working with George Walker and Jim Tolpin, who do by hand and eye, by hound and eye.
And they've got a series of Lost Art Press books, right?
Exactly. Yeah. They have a series, and we're working with them to help make lesson plans out of some of those books, and it's straight up geometry. Same with Joe Yucha, who's got a woodworking through boat building program. So we're going to tinker with his framing square math book this summer. So we're trying to not do it on our own. Again, community, like if there's other people out there integrating woodworking into their classes or into camps, we want to help.
And that's, I mean, again, for the listeners, that's another way of selling this to an interested program, is saying this isn't just woodworking. This is taking real-life geometry lessons and making them a part of a tangible item that the kids learn, you know, because how many times have you heard a kid say, when am I going to actually need to learn or when am I going to put the Pythagorean theorem into practice? Well, you know what? I made a chicken coop last week. I put it into practice.
Exactly.
You know, it's these skills, woodworking skills and carpentry skills, and it's a great way of actually proving math lessons right.
Yep.
So
I never cared about a sector until I tried to figure out how wide a river was. And there's again in this, it's called From Truth to Tools. It's another book by George Walker, Jim Tolpin. And the Romans used to try and they could estimate how wide the bridge needed to be even before they'd cross the river. And it was the theory of similar triangles. And I did that at a library with some kids, and it was really fascinating. And when you're off, if your arc is off, your distance is off. So it does really come alive. We've also done projects. We got a grant to do simple machines in physics. Lever, inclined plane, axle, and a brace and we actually used a brace and bit drill.
Okay.
Just to prove, how a screw works, and like an Archimedes screw where it could pull the wood chips out. So every day in woodworking, we're using all these classical techniques. And for kids learning it today, they don't necessarily care that it's classical or not, but it's got a real truth to it that resonates.
Yeah.
Because it's simple and it doesn't need to be fancy.
And
it's
they're seeing
effective.
it in action.
They're seeing it.
You see the wood chips being pulled up.
You know what else they do, Ben? They smell it.
Yeah.
When you smell that pine, you really
Everybody knows exactly. Yeah.
You're taken back to that place.
Yeah.
And that's what we're giving them, a really deep memory of being being confident, of being successful, of helping someone else, being empathetic, taking the lead. When kids finish early, instead of trying to find busy work for them, I say, okay, go help someone else.
Yeah.
And they do. And we made a toolbox where every tool has a label with a picture and the word, so they can learn where things go. They can clean up after themselves. These tabletop woodworking stations that I invented also fit in this toolbox. So kids can take a room and within a few minutes set it up. And then at the end of the class, we even include a dustpan. They can clean up, put everything away, and the teacher is thrilled. And the students are taking on a lot of responsibility, and they like that.
So let's talk about the toolbox a little bit. How large is the box? How much room in a classroom does it take up when it's not being used?
Right. So the box takes up about 7 square feet of space.
Okay.
It's made to fit through an ADA or American Disabilities Act doorway.
Okay.
So standard doorway, even narrower ones. The box is about 36 inches wide. It's about 30 inches deep, and it's about 4 feet tall.
And how many sets of tools are in the box?
So we have made these boxes to satisfy what's usually a room full of kids, which is you need space for the kids to work. And so my experience was, in the middle school science classroom where I teach a summer program, there's room for 4 good tables. So I made it for 16 kids. We just had an order from Asphalt Green, a camp in Manhattan, and they wanted to support 21 kids. So we made an extra wide one where it's 4 feet wide, still 30 inches deep, 4 feet high. And so it's got enough tools and woodworking stations for 22 kids. So we're getting requests from STEAM academies, from towns that are trying to bring back career training, trying to bring back some form of wood shop. The point of the toolbox is that it doesn't take up much space, and I like to say it plays nice with others, meaning you can use it in a multi-purpose room without having to have – there's no power tools, by the way.
Yeah.
So without power tools, you don't need ventilation. We don't do a lot of sanding, even though we provide eye protection, ear protection, dust masks. There's not a lot of airborne particles. We don't use when we use finishes, we only use shellac, so there's no VOC.
Yeah.
And because we train the teachers, and we even provide a book that goes with the tool chest that has all the lesson plans, all the safety rules. We also have online videos. The point is we want to make sure that the teachers are confident to teach.
Yeah.
So you don't need a dedicated shop teacher. And what's nice is that a lot of the people that I teach are between 22 and, say, 35. They grew up with the last years of shop class. And so they generally get it. They're comfortable. They're excited. They have their own recent memories of what they made. And so there's actually a massive population of potential teachers out there that just need to be activated.
Yeah.
And by going through the training, and they're the kind of people that if a principal or a camp director says, hey, I'm thinking of running a woodworking program this summer, this fall, they're the ones that raise their hands.
Yeah.
That's how you know.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. It's one question. Who wants to do woodworking? You? Great. And we can help train them on the rest. Once the attitude is there, they can really do it. So we're just trying to make it a lot simpler to enter woodworking. And woodworking, woodworking is its own end. However, it's a means to another end, which is for the young kids. Woodworking is a great medium for life skills.
Yeah.
And so I like to say I'm actually in the life skill business, and wood's a great medium. It's organic. It works with you. It gives you feedback. You're involved with the entire process, unlike watching a 3D printer render. And it can be combined with higher tech activities. I think it'd be a great program to do an AutoCAD, and design something, but then also actually have to fabricate it with hand tools.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of engineers who are graduating now that can't fix simple things.
There's a lot of designs being made
that just don't work.
That can't be made in the real world. I've done some work with Alan Casperin, and she actually teaches at a school of architecture, because these architects need to learn that, that drawing that you made can't actually, or this piece of furniture that you designed is not functional. It can't be made.
Right.
But they need to prove it out themselves. They need to see that you can't do that. And I woodwork with my son, and he'll come up with these awesome drawings, and that's great, but how are we going to assemble this? How are we going to make this? And sometimes we can figure it out, and sometimes, he has to accept that, we don't have the time for this, or sometimes he just doesn't have the patience for it. So let's simplify it. Let's just do this, and, and make it more doable for a 4-year-old.
Yep. Exactly. And sometimes it breaks.
Yeah.
And it's always a fascinating experience to show kids. I have them practice sawing, and they make these little 1-inch wide blocks, but they're very weak because they're cutting across the grain. And so, show them how easy it is to snap that block, but then have them cut a piece that's with the grain, and it's impossible to break.
Yeah.
And it's a big eye opener for them, because they never thought about, I didn't realize that wood grain mattered for strength.
Yep, especially with pine.
Especially with pine.
That's apparent.
Yep.
That's very easy to see.
Yep.
So what ages are you working, or is your program designed to work for?
So the sweet spot for the program for Maplewoodshop, is 2nd to 8th grade.
Okay.
You can work with kids that are younger. And do some of the simple projects. Once you get to 2nd grade, kids have a little better grip strength, a little better executive function. I think the real sweet spot is middle school. I think there was a reason why they started shop class in middle school. And although I've had great results doing complex projects with 4th and 5th graders as well. So what I'm working towards is a laddering program, so that if a school were to introduce something in the 2nd grade, when the kids hit 3rd grade, there's a different set of projects that build on what they already know. And this is based on a curriculum I saw in a book published by the Bank Street School in Upper Manhattan. And they've had woodworking for 20 years, but for like kindergartners, like for elementary school, and real pioneers in the field. If you don't count Sloyd 100 years ago, they the idea of laddering kids up so they can continually get more skills, and then keep moving on. What I also like is that once kids get competent with the tools, they can do something I call scrapitecture. And scrapitecture is just raiding the scrap bin and doing whatever you want. And again, they learn a lot about grain direction, because the scrap might be the right shape, but it's not in the right direction for what they want to do. Or they have to figure out how to glue things together, or et cetera, et cetera. But it's a very good design challenge for them, and it's sometimes the thing they like the most. So the point is, once teachers use our lesson plans, and we only offer those as a convenience. If it's too overwhelming to think of what to make and how to make it, we spell out the first level of plans.
Yeah.
And every year we introduce more lesson plans that I work out personally teaching enrichments and teaching in summer camps.
So
But once they go beyond that, we say, you know what, you've got a great toolbox. You can do a lot of things with this set of tools. Go off menu, try new things, and see what works.
And it isn't like you here's the tools, here's the program, I'm done with you. You actually have a program where the schools can send back the blades to you once a year, right?
Yep.
And you sharpen them and tune them up.
Exactly, and that's just the start. So we'll sharpen the blades. I have a Tormek. I'm a very proud owner of a T8, and get those blades just to razor sharpness. And I believe a sharp tool is a safe tool, as I'm sure the listeners agree. Then these woodworking stations, which are basically, it's a pair of tabletop woodworking stations that are connected by telescoping aluminum rails. And the advantage of them is that they self-clamp onto any rectangular table. Mm-hmm. They expand from about 30 inches to 48 inches. I have a cabinet maker in New Jersey, where I'm from, and his name's Tyler Merson, Codfish Park Design, makes these beautiful, out of Baltic birch, like 13 ply, 3/4 inch, very bulletproof. And they are made to protect the tables. So they're impossible to put a nail through. Even when sawing, there's these little front feet that get chewed up. We'll replace those. There's a saw stop that's made for a pull saw, which is sort of unique on the market. And that is also meant to get consumed. So there's parts that get consumed and can be replaced. In addition, we check in. We want to make sure that the teachers are comfortable, everything's working out. So I in another life, I worked in the service industry. And so I know the value of account management and checking in, because we get great feedback. Here's what's working, here's what isn't working, here's an idea that we've thought of, and it's always wonderful. I believe life's iterative. You're always trying new things, and you always learn new things. And one simple example is I didn't work. We had a booth at a maker fair, and a friend of mine was, showing kids how to use a coping saw. And the classic mistake with a coping saw is you hold the wood with one hand, you can't see your index finger, and you saw into it, right? So he said, why don't you have kids cross their thumbs on the handle?
I saw that on your website, yeah.
Yeah, and it turned out that crossing your thumbs not only solved that problem, but it solved the problem of centering yourself. Now, we haven't figured out yet how to cope up and down, which would be nice. So they're sawing back and forth. But still, it helps center their bodies and help get much better body kinetics around the coping saw. And our use of Band-Aids really plummeted. So the point is, we always are iterating and learning things. And so having that dialogue with the people who are using the platform, if you will, is really wonderful. Because what I'd love to see is that we have now at this point there's 10 camps and 4 schools that are using this Maplewoodshop program, and more coming online. We made the training. I recorded it all, so it's all on video and available on a web platform. And so now we're able to do things remote. We have a customer in New Hampshire. We have a camp in Texas. I've never been to either, but I can Skype with them for the stuff that you really need to face-to-face, and the rest we ship on a tractor trailer. So we can do this anywhere in the country. And what I'm excited about is having a big enough community of Maplewoodshop users and trainers so that people can start sharing ideas between themselves. Because, we can only think of so many things, and we're humble. We know that there's other people out there with better ideas. So we're excited to, have other people use the system. And when I say that, it means that you don't need exotic tools. You know that these woodworking stations, which are a big part of the safety because they hold the wood, instead of your hand holding the wood, that if they're using those, let's have contests. Let's have design contests.
Well, probably your best ideas that come from the community are going to come from 10-year-olds.
Right.
Honestly.
Exactly.
So for our listeners, what's a way that they can find out more and maybe present your program to those around them? Is there enough information on the website for them to get an idea, or do you want people to reach out to you? What's the next step?
Sure. So on the website, there's a presentation that people can download and share with their school administrator or camp director. And if there's also a form they can fill out to put us in touch with someone, and we will follow up on all of them. We're very excited to, have this grassroots approach towards, my grandson, my granddaughter goes to this camp, and I'd love to see woodworking there. Their woodworking teacher retired. We even helped camps, figure out what parts of their wood shop were salvageable and which ones weren't. There's some tools. I was like, I don't know how you're using that with kids. Like, oh, the kids never touched it, which makes me think, well, what's the point?
Yeah.
So the thing about our tools, the tools that we've selected, is that kids can use all of them. And the teachers don't need to do anything. The less the teacher does, the better. The more the kid does, the more empowered the kid is. So we want to help bring it back. And so we've very purposefully chosen what we hope is a low barrier. We tried to make it simple to set up, simple to implement, simple to run, and cost effective too, because you don't need the dedicated teacher, the dedicated shop. And so they can help put us in touch with those people who can decide to implement it. And or if they want to, it's a little late for the season, but if people want to teach at camps and or schools, there's always after-school programs that are looking for teachers.
Absolutely. So, and all of our listeners, every single one of you knows that there's a problem, knows that there's a void of woodworking education, especially with young kids. And your kids, your grandkids get a pass because they're in your shops. They're out there building step stools, and that's great. But this is a real problem. It's a problem with society right now. So this is something that you can do about it, and you can get trained, get the program, go out there and start teaching, or help find someone who is ready to start teaching. Help them facilitate everything that they need to do with the program, with the tools, and the training. It's an all-in-one package. And I was somebody at Find Woodworking Live had told John Benson about your program, and both of us were looking at this and was like, this is genius. This is what the world needs right now. It needs more woodworking, and it needs to be easy to do. It needs to be, it doesn't need to be this complicated, unattainable thing. This is something that can be integrated into any school system. So if anyone's interested, head over to maplewoodshop.com.
Maplewoodshop.com, all one word.
Reach out to Mike, and
We're in Maplewoodshop. We're in Maplewood, New Jersey.
All right.
Hence the name.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your program with us and our listeners. And I hope some people head to your website and sign up.
Thank you, Ben.
All right.
Thank you very much.